I just put you into the assessments folder here so you can see the new item that I've added at the very top to give you an example of what this Springer LNCS template looks like when used in anger. And what I've done is to take the document, the Governance Strategies for Cloud and Big Data in Education, which is a paper I'm presenting at a conference in London in about 4 weeks' time. And that one shows you what it looks like in the IEEE format, which is completely different to anything that you've used before probably. And it's quite complicated to use. Your colleagues used it last year and it was quite difficult. So I've shown you the whole paper there, and then I've taken the first couple of sections out of it and put it into the Springer version with the correct formatting, the correct citing and referencing to Harvard standards, whereas the IEEE uses numeric and a completely different way of doing it, pretty much everything. So you can see how much effort there is moving between different templates. And the idea is to give you an example of what I'm expecting for the assignment. Nice and simple. It's a 3 pages implementation of it, roughly, plus 1 for the 3 or 4 references which are net relevant. Although the actual article has about 35 to 40 references in it for 5,500 words. So it's just sort of one of your colleagues suggested last week it would be really helpful, and I thought, that's a clever idea, and I've done that for you there. So you can see what it looks like and try and get it as close to that as you possibly can. So, to today's. The topic for today is how to go about making notes. Because you've probably picked up that I'm quite keen on you researching and researching and reading and reading. That's how you're basically finding all of those great ideas for your article that you're busy writing and finishing off for submission on, which day was it, folks? Friday for most of you. Yeah. And you've been doing quite a lot of research. A lot of you have got quite a lot of sources. You've built a pretty good working bibliography. One of the things that's really important is actually to make notes as you do your research. In fact, as you listen in lectures like this and other ones that you get from other colleagues of mine in your other modules. And one of the things to do is, think about is how to go about making most effective notes. And we'll also think a little bit about the question, why on earth should I bother to make notes? So those are the sort of areas we're going to be covering today. The point is that to be successful as a student, as a researcher, you need to develop a whole range of different skills. We've been looking at some of those over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And this is just the next one that's important. How to go about developing good skills that will help you do your research, and then from having done your research, plan out the way that you're going to develop your writing. Going back to those questions last week about what do I need to say as compared to the broader picture of what I want to say. And your notes are going to be part of that mechanism that you're going to use to get from what I want to say, all of the content of all of that huge list of sources I've found in research. And how do I narrow it down? By making notes is one of the great ways of doing it. And it's to do with while you're in a lecture, like here, because you don't want to write down every last word that I say. You'll be writing much too fast to be able to read your own handwriting, and you've got a video to look at anyway and to listen to. So what is the purpose of those notes about a lecture? And the second thing is how to develop notes that are going to be useful as you develop that assignment. How many of you have got someone sitting next to you who's got an electronic device that can get at the internet to do a quick bit of research? Are there enough electronically enabled people here to be able to do some research? Yeah, I guess we have. So, for 2 or 3 minutes, as many as you who can get onto Google, have a look for university websites, have a look which might provide you some ideas about why are notes useful to us while we study. And if there's nobody next to you, try and move around a little bit till you can find someone who has got a laptop or a smart device that can actually do a little bit of research. And those of you who have got laptops or other smart devices, if you'd like to move around and share them, help move them closer to people who haven't got something. Okay. So, you probably found one or two at least, I hope, most of you, with laptops and tablets and so on. What sort of ideas have you got that would give you answers on how you make notes? What are the important factors? Shorthand, you could do it shorthand if you learned how to do shorthand, yep. What else has come out of your quick bit of research?
You rewrite points that makes it easier for you to understand.
If you rewrite the points in your own language, it makes it easier to understand. Yep.
Pick out relevant things.
Ah, now there's a good one. Now, pick out relevant things. So what we've had, first two are the technique, the mechanism. Now we're getting at the reasoning almost. So you're picking out the relevant things. What do you mean by that?
The website we looked at, I think that if you were looking at, say, specific, say like date and time.
Okay, so you're trying to find out or extract from the lots and lots of words one or two things that are really, really important to you. And this is one of the clues. Your notes, all 100 or plus more of you, will all be different because you will pick out different things as being important. So pick out important or relevant things. Yep. What else? You could, as again, as technique to help make it easier, break up the text in different, or highlight it in different colours so that you've got topic-related colours. Then you've got a visual clue when you go back to your notes as to which bits relate to what. Yep.
Increases your attention span.
Making notes increases your attention span. Did it say why it does that?
Because you're engaged.
Because, sorry?
Because you're engaged.
Because you're engaged. What do you mean by engaged?
Interacting with the subject, I suppose.
You're interacting with the subject and you're thinking about the subject. You're thinking about how things connect together. Yeah. Other ideas from further up at the back? So we've got 3 or 4 things you can do to make notes more easy to understand. If you're really good at shorthand, you can use shorthand, or you can pick out relevant clues, relevant important things, colouring for coding it, different topics. All of this helps because it makes you start thinking about what you're hearing, what you're reading, and what you're doing. Another thing you can do is, as you are listening in an engaged fashion, you're likely to have thoughts like, ooh, that's an interesting connection with, I better write it down before I forget it. Because so many times, lovely ideas come to us while we're listening, and our memory gets overloaded with all the clever ideas that have come to us, and at the end of that lecture, or at the end of that piece of stuff we're reading, what was it I thought about? And so if you've written it down, you won't forget it. And you'll be able to come back to it and then develop that idea a little bit later on. So these are all some of the reasons why, or how to do it. And guys, when you do go back to this a little bit later on, make sure you build it into a working bibliography for your skills, so that you can come back to this in the future and think, yes, this is how I need to make my notes. Well, I don't think you've done your mind map because it's not easy to get hold of the mind mapping software any longer here, although I think in the library you probably can. But there's an interesting article in the Week 8 folder of course resources, but a paper by Nabi and Bagley. And I'd like you to get hold of that, not just now, but after this session, because it's about what are the skills that employers are looking for in graduates. And it also includes a survey by those 2 guys working over at Nottingham a few years ago, surveying graduates about what they found employers were looking for as skills for employability. And there's a list of about 20 which are really, really useful. And I would like you to start thinking about how you can plan to develop those skills over the next 2.5 years here at the university, and perhaps during the year while you're out on placement. So Nabi and Bagley is a really great article about what do we need to be able to do. And what's interesting about that article, which you can see is 1999 when it was published, so it was researched in 97, 98. So that's kind of, what, 14, 15, 16 years ago. The list of skills and attributes that you need to develop are the same ones now as they were 17 years ago. They're the same ones that employers keep complaining to universities that we don't develop them in you guys, and they keep complaining about graduates to the graduates themselves and saying, hey guys, you really don't show the skills we need you to display for you to be a good employee. Now, your placement year obviously is going to be a really great opportunity for you to really see some of these things in action, to develop them. So that's why I've got this section in here. Now, what I want you to do between now and next week, amongst all the other things you're doing, finishing off with this assignment and the various other ones, spend an hour or so, that's all you need to spend on this. Read through that Nabian Bagley article, and then make a few notes on these things called transferable skills. The things that you can use in almost any situation. That's why they're called transferable. They work across almost every type of employment, in every subject area, in every skill area. This is not about the knowledge you have about computer science or forensics investigations or any of the other technical subjects. This is about how you handle information, how you find information, how you communicate. These are things that are almost more important than any of the technical knowledge we're going to try and get you to learn over the next 3-4 years. The transferable skills are absolutely fundamental. So, make some notes about the 3 different types of transferable skill. Identify which skills out of the list of 20 fit into each of those 3 areas. And then think for yourself, okay, right, I'm trying to make notes. What is the most effective way for me or you? You see, we're all different. I keep coming back to difference, and next week it'll be really strongly about differences. Some people love mind maps electronically, some love them on paper and pencil or paper and pen. Some like just writing by hand in a structured way. Some writing by hand with coloured highlighting. There's all sorts of ways that you can develop the most effective form of note-making for yourself. So I want you to practice this on this little item here, where the productive output for you is identifying the skills, the transferable skills, that you need to develop over the next 3 to 4 years, whilst you are fairly safely here at the University of Derby. Then there are in the folder for week 8 identification of 3 other sources of information about transferable skills. I want you to, first of all, identify what those skills are, and then make short notes about each of these items. I want you to get engaged with the idea of developing transferable skills so you become really successful both students and also future employees. That's why I'm talking about these today, because you've got 3 years to develop many of these skills, whether it's teamwork, communication, critical thinking, all the other things that are really, really sought after by employees or employers, out there. The sort of things that you can collect evidence about as you do your work here. Because when you apply for a job, and you'll be doing that this time next year, as all of you are going to be applying for your placement year, you will be applying for a real job. You will be getting into a heap of applications from your colleagues here and from other universities. You will need to be able to demonstrate in your application that you have these sort of transferable skills with evidence. I have this skill and I can show that it was done, I got it because I gave a presentation in a particular module, perhaps. Or we worked as a team, there are 4 of us working as a team, and we had a successful little mini project. These are the sort of evidence that you will need to be able to put into your job application. And if you can do that, then the likelihood of getting a job quickly is likely to be much, much higher than if you just generally waffle around the subject that, You know, you're not going to get a job with that sort of application. But evidence-based skills is what they're looking for. How can you document it? And at the end of term, week 12, we'll have a look at a framework which is used across the whole of the computer science, computing and IT industries as a way of identifying the skills you've got and the level of those skills. And so we'll look at that in week 12. These are the sort of broader transferable skills, some of which then fit into parts of the framework that we're going to look at called Sophia. So identify these other from these other 3 sources a whole range of other skills which may overlap with the Nabian-Bagley set. Make short notes for yourself about those skills, what they are, what they mean to you. Have you got them? To what level have you got them? And what evidence have you got so far? And then a plan of where you want to go over the next 2 or 3 years to develop them to a higher level. And then start thinking a little bit about why is it that employers are so keen on you graduates developing these skills? What is it about the workplace? What is it about working in computer forensics or networks and securities or in IT or computer science that make these so important? Because even for the most geeky parts of computer science, programming and so on, writing programs, you still need many of these skills to get the job. And then as I'm developing this mini research project to help you become the most employable students that the University of Derby has ever produced, and the most employable university graduates across the whole of the British university system. That's what I would like you to be. That's what all of us in the school, Department of Computing and Maths want you guys to be, is the most employable students who will get the best jobs as quickly as possible after university. Now, a little bit more research then takes you into further sources that will help you to understand more about these transferable skills and what they might mean to you and to your future employers. So you can either be looking in the bibliographies of those 4 articles, which are dated around about 1999 and a little bit later, going backwards in time through the bibliographies there, or you can also use those same ideas and develop some keywords and search in the academic sources to find more recent publications about transferable skills. that graduates are expected to have that employers are hoping that you guys are having, and that employers continually say isn't there. When I was at that conference a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas, we were reminded time and time again in the educational side that we are not yet, as universities across the world, delivering graduates who are good at communication. We don't seem to be delivering across the whole industry graduates who are really good at teamwork. Which is a bit of a problem, so this is why I want you to start thinking about it, and where you do get the opportunities to make presentations or to work in teams, take that on board and really make those teams work. Communicate, find out how to work with each other, find out what makes communication work within the team. And as you then present at the end of term or in the middle of term, whenever it is you need your team presentation or your individual presentation, think about all of these things and use this opportunity to really get to understand these things called transferable skills. And then think about those 2 white bullet points. This is really very, very close to yourself. To understand exactly who you are. This is not something you necessarily want to talk about to other people around you. This is something you need to think about. Which of those transferable skills am I really good at, and why, and how, and what's the evidence? But just as importantly, which of them aren't I very good at? Why aren't I very good at it? Does it matter? What should I be doing to get better at them, and can I learn them? I may not be naturally good at it, but hey, I can at least learn a bit about it. Where will I learn about it? How can I learn about it? How can I practice? That's what we're really looking at in those 2 white bullet points. And at this point, you possibly have got down to the sort of subheadings if you're using indented paragraphs, or subheadings and headings and subheadings and subheadings. We're getting down to the essentially consequences of consequences of consequences. The thing that's really important to develop. So before we move on, any questions first about transferable skills and being a student, or transferable skills and being an employee? No questions yet? Okay. So, yet more questions. Remember, I keep saying I teach questions, not answers. And these are more useful questions that you can think about. Because as you look at those transferable skills, whether in Nabi and Bagley or in the other 3 articles, some of them, or a lot of them are for employability. Well, they all came from employability to start with. But some of them, maybe all of them, apply to you as students. Things you need to develop to become excellent, high-achieving, high-grade earning students. Look at those skills, that list of 20 plus all the others, and work out the answers for yourself. Which ones do you need to have as a student yourself? Which ones are you learning from Introduction to Computer Science as a module? Whether my section or Wayne's section. And think about your other 2 modules. Are you learning anything about these skills in your other 2 modules that you're doing this term? Are there any skills that you're learning in Programming 1, Introduction to Computer Sciences, and your 3rd module? Are the skills you're developing which aren't mentioned in this list up there? And then think about the notes. Notes like, I need to research more, a little reminder. I need to be thinking about this. I need to go over there and find some more information about that bit. You can kind of create yourself a separate bibliography of sources you need to follow up, or you need to find some sources for these ideas. Sort of notes for further research, build bibliography in this direction. But you also need to be actively engaged in what you're doing and not just passively absorbing all of this information. You need to be thinking carefully about what you're researching, the notes you're making, and come up with questions. Part of making notes during a lecture is a question you want to ask your colleagues, your friends, or the lecturer, or maybe the tutor in a workshop later on, where your memory is bound to fail you, because it'll fail most of us. So, questions to follow up. Because that is part of this critical thinking we want you to develop, that you need to develop, that is a perpetual complaint from employers. Graduates don't critically think. Which is kind of interesting, because we thought that was what we were teaching you mainly. So, question for future reference for academics is, we teach critical thinking and yet it doesn't seem to stick. So that's me making a note in my mind, not on paper, because I haven't got any at the moment, about something like this. So it applies, this approach doesn't just apply to you, it applies to me as well. So that really is a summary of how we go about developing notes that are going to be very, very useful in terms of helping us to develop. So, any questions now? Here is the sort of top of the second page. And those 3 items at the top left, right there are the 3 types of sort of skills that are desperately needed, both to be a successful student and to be a successful employee. Things that to do with you personally, your ability to work as a team, your ability to manage time effectively, and prioritizing tasks. And I think some of you are already running into a little bit of a problem with time management and task prioritization. As you come to the situation, around about now, week 7, 8, 9, you've got an article for this part of the module. You've got Programming 1, having various tasks that you've got to submit, and so on. And some of the comments I've had in the workshop have been along the lines of, well, I'm having problems at the moment because I'm trying to concentrate on one module, or the programming, and I can't quite get my head around the article, or I'm now just sort of getting to grips with the article because of... And it's all time management and prioritization, guys. You've always got to solve this problem, not just here, but later on. So the second set is writing and spoken communication. And the third one is about solving problems. And when you think about it, programming, computer programming in Programming 1 is all about solving a problem. Yeah, I know you have different languages, whether it's C++, C#, C++, etc., etc. But the different languages you use are not terribly important. What's important about computer programming is actually solving problems. And so you're looking at a lot of information about what is the nature of this task that has to be programmed, and thinking about logic, thinking about the way you get your information into your program and out of your program in a way that is useful to human beings. Whether you're using a game really doesn't actually affect the purpose of learning how to program. Sometimes using a little game program is actually quite helpful because it's nice and simple. Whereas if you wanted to dive deep into Programming 1 with some important deep part of security or networks management or, I don't know, computer forensics, that's actually quite complicated compared with if this is your first go at programming. So what we're trying to develop, or you're trying to develop in Programming 1, for example, is thinking about assessing information and solving a problem that needs some logic applied to it, which can then be converted into some programming language of some sort or other. The language is actually almost totally irrelevant at the moment. But we're developing some of those sorts of skills. And then, I can't show you on here in one page the full set, but this gives you some of the things that are really important in terms of being a great student and being a great employee. So you can see, levels of initiative. Is that innate or is it something I can develop? What about independence? How much do I really cope without needing to be guided all of the time? And one of the things about the Sophia framework that I'll be showing you in week 12, last week of term, is about how good you are at not needing to be supervised minute by minute or day by day or hour by hour. And it leads into your independent studies in your final year when you're doing your project. Will become your project, your idea, and your supervisor will be there just to provide a little guidance on those few occasions when you really need help. Because I don't understand this, or you may just want to have a discussion about ideas. Like some of the times in the workshops this last few weeks. I've not needed to guide you, many of you. We just had a discussion about interesting ideas, about the changes over the last 20, 30 years. And that discussion has helped you to firm up your ideas. And that's part of what we'll be looking for in terms of independence. You've got the ideas, you're discussing it, and you're making the judgments yourself in conjunction with perhaps your colleagues. Teamwork, leadership, making the most of opportunities as they present themselves. Planning, organising, establishing priorities, and so on. These are all sort of things which aren't obviously things that we actively teach you. But you need to be able to develop them to become really great employees. These are the list of things that every year, employers in their surveys are coming up with, these are things we want you, that's you guys, to have when you come to us. And they like to have evidence as well. So, what's the time? Let's just have another look at another one. This was the first list. And this actually is a similar list, but from the perception, you know, the graduates who were being surveyed, did they feel that these were important? And it's male versus female. So again, you can see some interesting patterns coming out here, for example, of the difference between the male and the female responses as graduates. Because, you know, we're different. And so next week, you'll find just how different we can be. And we'll find out a little bit about why we might be different. To explain the some of those differences between importance or perceived importance, say time management, or where's another good one? Yeah, self-assessment. But time management, planning, organisation, those seem to be the main differences. And you can see that it's not always females more or less, but it's a changing pattern, which also helps us to understand a little bit about the dynamics within our own teams. Who's most interested in getting the planning done or managing the plan effectively? Listening, you can see there, 4.2, 4.4. Listening is clearly more important, on average, by a small amount admittedly, to women than to men. But let's go back to, was it last week? 4 opportunities for taking in information versus 1 for transmitting. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. As a challenge to you blokes like me, do we remember that all the time, or do we want to get our message across? So, work through this article, work through the other ones that come with it. In the bibliographies that you'll find attached to this folders worth of work for this week. See what you can come up with in terms of beginning to develop your own plan to develop some of these transferable skills.